With the state being in as much debt as it is, it's understandable to see that there would be a lot of changes to compensate for the lack of money. People will always have their individual views on what they believe is right and what is wrong, but some things that happen are just plain old ridiculous. A good example of how ridiculous things can get is a vastly growing number of schools that are becoming overcrowded. It's bad enough that to save money the state is cutting back on teachers and their salaries, but to jeopardize the future of thousands of kids is to some just inhumane. A lot of the money the state spends is on things that are unnecessary in relation to the importance of education. There's tens of thousands of dollars being spent just for every year of Spanish classes at the average middle school, teaching Spanish to a population of kids where the majority are already native Spanish speakers. See, the overcrowding of schools is just not about the fact that the kids are packed into rooms or don't have enough books for everyone to have their own, or any other of the problems that you can see right off the back. This one problem can spiderweb off into so many other problems that it's hard to see why the state doesn't focus more of the taxpayers' money on education. See, when things are funded by the state's taxpayers' money, people tend to get real touchy when it comes to how that money is being spent, and that's when all the conspiracies and problems arise. See, it's hard to understand why the state doesn't understand that if you do things the right way at the right times, then you will get the right results. But the fact of the matter is that no matter what, the state's main priorities will always rely on whatever makes them and saves them the most money, no matter who it jeopardizes. The root of all evil isn't money, but in fact the greedy people behind it. They're the ones who are the source of a lot of the state's budget problems. School overcrowding is extremely wrong in so many ways when put into perspective. You see, the type of person a child becomes is based on the environment that they're brought up in and the things they experience throughout their childhood. The majority of a kid's time from ages 4 to 18 is spent in school. The things that they experience and learn during their time in school shape them into the people they're going to become for the rest of their lives, along with some other factors, but school is definitely one of the major factors. The young mind is like a sponge and just absorbs everything, and because a person aged 4 to 18 usually hasn't experienced too much of life's real issues or problems, except for certain people in different circumstances, they usually end up making situations and events more important than they really are. For example, the way a kid dresses is extremely important to them and their confidence. How they perceive themselves is usually however their peers see them, so if they can't keep up with today's fashions and trends, then they will definitely be talked about and bullied. It's just how kids are. Well, with schools being overcrowded, that means there's going to be a wider variety of kids, meaning there's going to be a lot more bullying. Usually, the schools that are more overcrowded than others just so happen to be in the poorer areas of California. In other words, schools in ghettos and low class areas usually don't get as much money or attention compared to schools in better areas. With the overcrowded schools being located in poorer areas, that usually means that the kids attending the schools are going to be of a lower class, so the problems will usually be more intense in relation to bullying and violence. Now, with the outside issues of those students being added to the school's problems of already being overcrowded, the situations just get worse. The violence rate already goes higher when a school is overcrowded, so when you have a school of students who are prone to be more violent and hostile attending that school, then you just start a circle of more problems, because usually those types of things never really get better before they get worse. When a school has way too many students in attendance, they usually try to find ways to compensate, and usually it's not done in the favor of the students, but more so in the favor of what things can be done to save money. When it comes to saving money, the state definitely cuts back, and it's usually at the expense of the students in some way. For example, to save money, they can cut back on utilities by not running the air conditioner or heater as much as they usually do. Doing so across a number of schools can definitely save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but what about the students? It's bad enough that most of the students view school as a hassle more than a priority, so when you add to the fact that the school being overcrowded, you can expect to have a large group of restless students. Usually, the larger the number of students, the less attention they pay to school and the more attention they pay to each other. Kids usually tend to act out and become more restless when they're somewhere doing something that they don't want to. And being that they already don't care much for learning things that they think don't matter to them, adding in the factor of them being uncomfortably hot or uncomfortably cold, the attention span usually drops drastically. This leads to the students not paying attention, which usually reflects in their grades and keeps them from really reaching their full potential. Another way to cut costs is to reduce the number of extracurricular activities in order to have more money to be put into the classrooms. Well, from the outside, it doesn't seem too bad. It's not like they're taking away money from the things the kids need for school, so why fret? Well, usually the main things a lot of kids take from school come from the extracurricular activities they have, be it sports, clubs, ASB, or any other programs average schools have. Like I stated before, kids don't really care much for coming to school and having to learn, so when they're in sports or different clubs or groups, they're given more reasons to want to do better in school, because usually the requirements or what the programs are based on revolve around their grades or things they're learning in school. When those activities are reduced, the amount of attention and importance of school to a student usually goes down, which reflects in their grades and in turn prevents them from really reaching their full potential. Another method of saving money is to bus the kids to another school that is not as crowded. This idea doesn't seem too bad from the outside. The only problems seen are the kids just having to wake up earlier to make it to school on time. Well, unfortunately, that's nowhere near the bottom of the problems. Usually, when kids are bused to different areas, it can usually take a lot longer to get to school than usual. So, when kids have to get up earlier, they're usually not getting enough sleep on top of a long ride to an area that they're not even from, just makes them more restless. Then, with them attending a school so far away, it usually makes it harder for the parent to be involved. It's bad enough that the average parents in these areas can't be involved in their children's school life due to them having to work to keep the child fed and a roof over their head. But now, with the school being even farther away than usual, it makes it just that much harder for the parents to get involved. Now, on top of the parents not being able to help keep them on track as much as they want to, usually when a kid rides a bus to school, they also ride it home. There's no school bus that comes for students who stay after for the extracurricular activities, so if the parent can't pick the student up or afford for them to ride the city bus every day, well, then the student just has to miss out. Now, they can't be with their friends as much, they can't get involved with the things they want to do on campus as much, they have to get up extra early every day just to get to school on time, so it just seems like to them that school is more of a hassle than anything, which leads to them to not having as much interest as they should in school, which reflects on their grades and in turn keeps them from reaching their full potential. With all these different methods of trying to deal with overcrowding, it's safe to say that you can see that the state isn't doing these things to help make the students' learning experience better, but that they'd rather put the state's money toward things that would help make them a bigger profit. If the state would stop thinking in the mode of money and more in the mode of reality, then they would see that it's a lot smarter in the long run to invest in the one thing that's going to keep bringing them more money: their people. All in all, the problem with overcrowding in schools is just immoral. The state of California prides itself on being one of the biggest states all around in the nation. Some of the nation's best schools, jobs, companies, etc. are all located in California. So how can a state that holds itself to such a high standard not invest in the one thing that keeps them going? Without a decent education, there's no way of making it in today's world. Even a bachelor's degree won't get you as far as it used to. So if the state is taking away from the one thing that generates them money in the long run, how do they expect to be the same outstanding state they are now 20 years from now? All of those kids that went through all of this are now going to be adults and trying to make it in the world, and it won't be an easy task at all. Now there's going to be higher unemployment rates, higher numbers of people receiving different types of aid because they're too poor to survive on their own, pretty much just all around a vicious cycle. Now when things eventually get this bad, that's when the conspiracy theories start coming to the surface. I mean, as much corruption that goes on in the government today, is it not outlandish to think that this might not be just a problem erected from poor financial planning by the state, but more so a plan erected to keep the poor poor and the rich rich?